What I have here is Alex Han, H-A-N, his tweet that has a first sentence in it that is absurdly untrue. And this person, Alex Hahn, is executive director of In These Times magazine, apparently. Um, uh, he doesn't have that many followers, but In These Times magazine does. That over 50,000 followers. That's a progressive outlet. I'm not very familiar with them, but I just know that their brand is progressive. He apparently previously worked for Bernie Sanders. He doesn't specify there. All of that is just according to his Twitter bio, of course. Um, and this is just a ridiculous statement. I have no idea why we haven't seen anyone in the political media state a clear fact that in 2020 homicide rates surged across the country. What is he talking about? This is what this is all they talked about. Look at this. This is if you go to google.com and you search homicide rise and then you hit the news tab and then you hit the tools thing over here and you hit the custom date range January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. That's just all of 2020. We're going to hit go and we're going to find about the homicide rise from people in the political media. Vox, the murder increase in the U.S. explained. Charlotte Observer, violence rising in the city. What's Charlotte's murder rate now? Does it say anything about 2020? No, this might be about 2019. There's some stuff that are about 2019, so I want to be, I want to be specific. He said nobody talked about 2020. Everybody talked about 2020. We're gonna get to it. Homicides rise in L.A., reflecting a national trend of violence. Los Angeles Times. I'm gonna sit up. I'm uncomfortable a bit. Um. Ow, my shoulder. Okay. Maybe more than a bit. I don't know. Louisiana's death rate for pregnant women is twice the average. Homicide is a leading cause. Austin homicide rate amid COVID-19 pandemic among the nation's highest, report says. Has Austin seen more homicides in 2020 than in the past 20, I don't know, years or something? I don't know what the end of that sentence is. The Wall Street Journal, homicide spike hits most large U.S. cities. Okay, and I want to particularly note the big national sources. So, the Wall Street Journal, that's important. NBC News, which is funny because he's quote tweeting an NBC News reporter. NBC News reported early numbers suggest domestic violence homicides may be on the rise around the country. As police officers across America quit, homicide rates rise in America's biggest cities. There's ABC 7, that's a local news station, talking about Oakland crime spikes in the COVID-19 pandemic. Worst homicide rate in 7 years. Another local source, murder milestone, Grand Rapids sets record with 35th homicide of 2020. COVID blamed for rise in murders across U.S. That last one was a New York Times headline. So that's pretty big. That's pretty noteworthy. I would say that the New York Times is a political paper. San Francisco Chronicle: killings in Bay Area up 14% in first half of 2020. The Guardian: Mexico murder rate reaches new high as violence rages amid COVID-19 spread. Does it say across the country? So we're not talking about Mexico. Homicides go unsolved as killings in Minneapolis rise. That's a public radio, Minnesota public radio source. Okay, we've got Milwaukee County. There's a Guardian article. Homicides rise across U.S. cities amid pandemic and economic crisis. NPR: hate crimes. FBI tally shows record. Oh, these are 2019 increases. It doesn't count. DC's homicide numbers for 2020 have surpassed last year's. It's WAMU. They do some national programming. But they're the local public radio station in DC, or one of them anyway. Okay, we've got the Washington. Well, that's Mexico again. Murder. It's if we go to okay. Christian Science Monitor, big national publication. 2020's murder increases unprecedented, but is it a blip? Cincinnati Enquirer: Cincinnati homicides 2020 is the deadliest year on record. We're talking, this is about San Antonio spike in homicide cases. We've got oh boy. There's at BC News stop and frisk pro stop and frisk propaganda. I guess. I hope filed under opinion. I guess it's think opinion. Yeah. That's Reason magazine, the libertarian publication. What explains why homicides are increasing significantly? If I were to change this date range and change it to 2021, because of course in 2021 they're also talking about homicide rates that had increased in 2020. Homicide rise continues in major U.S. cities, report says. I'd have to actually click on some of these probably to see whether they're referring back to 2020, but I'm sure they are. Homicides are up, but GOP misleads with claims about blame in the AP. Cities across the U.S. are breaking all-time homicide records this year. And then it says, but the murder rate in 2020 was about 6.5, about 40% below what? I wonder what that says. 40% below. Yeah, this is 40% below what it was in the 1980s and 1990s. But So a little spike is not evidence of a major trend. This is rose 30% from 2019 to 2020, the largest single year increase the agency has recorded since it began tracking these crimes in the 1960s. So again, that's referring to a CNN referring to an increase in homicides, um, or was it not specifically homicides? Let me see. Yeah, it's homicides, specifically homicides. Um, 2019 was Jacksonville's deadliest year in decades. Oh, that's 2019. That's about 2019, not 2020. Atlanta Journal-Constitution. U.S. sees the highest jump in homicides in 100 years, CDC says. Was that referring to 2020? It says 30% from 2019 to 2020. This is a CDC study. There's a number of female homicide victims rises 10% in a year. We're probably talking. Oh, this is not United States statistics, and it's 2018 to 2019. National homicide Gothamist national homicide rate rises in FBI report, and is reflected in New York State. 4,901 more homicides took place across the country in 2020 as compared to 2019, according to the FBI. You know, it's very ironic that an editor, an executive. Oh, I'm sorry. I I said editor maybe, but it says executive director, not editor. Um, so what are they doing executive directing a publication that is supposedly progressive, and they're saying ridiculous things like this? I don't know. Um, I guess executive director is like the administrative side, the business side, but it's a non-profit maybe, so I think they use the term executive director instead of like CEO or I don't know, president, whatever. Um, I mean, it's just Los Angeles Times op-ed refers to homicide on the rise in 2021. We've got murder rose by almost 30% in 2020. It's rising at a slower rate in 2021. Pew Research Center. What we know about the increase in U.S. murders in 2020? Plenty of political reporters talk about what Pew Research Center's reports say. It just it's the guy was living under a rock for the last for for the last 3 years, or he is just very. He doesn't absorb information very well, I guess, or is lying. He's either he either wasn't paying any attention to any of the news for 3 years, or in particularly, I think 2020 and 2021, at least, or he's just lying, and I don't know why he's lying, if he's lying. It's just crazy. 12 major cities hit all-time homicide records. Now, this is actually increased from 2020, so they're actually referring to. But then it says a year that nearly broke the 1990 record. It's more referring to the 2020 to 2021 increase. And we've got a fact check from the Guardian about how bad is the rise in U.S. homicides. Homicides were up across the U.S. in 2020 and appeared to be primarily driven by rising gun violence, but other crimes fell. Okay, that explains that fact. Okay, we've got, for the second year in a row in 2021, cities nationwide are seeing a rise in gun violence and homicides. So also referring to a 2019 to 20 increase. Like, oops. NPR. I mean, Forbes from 2021 saying that homicides rose 30% in biggest U.S. cities last year. And pandemic racial justice protests were likely factors. Now we talk this Indy Star, major paper in Indianapolis, uh, uh, talks about a steep increase in killings in 2020 and 2021. It's all over. It's been all over the news for 3 years, or 2 years at least from my search. I'd have to check on, the 2000, 2022. Milwaukee breaks city homicide record for second year in a row. Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. U.S. records largest annual increase in murders in 6 decades. Okay. With the national murder rate rising nearly 30% in 2020, the biggest jump in 6 decades. I mean, there's a Philadelphia Inquirer article about a startling rise in homicides, although that may refer to 2021. I don't know. Ohio's homicide rate highest in decades. It was, and it's referring to a rise between a 40% rise, between 2019 and 2020. The biggest increase seen over the past 35 years. And that's an Axios. That's a national publication. So they do have these sort of local partnership stuff. But whatever, it's a national publication. National brand. Early. Yeah, so what Philadelphia reveals about America's homicide surge. ProPublica. It's all over. Is this referring to 2020? Probably. I'm not going to find things easily. Well, I could search, do Control F 2020. The nationwide homicide rate jumped 25% in 2020. Just taking it back to where it was in the late 1990s, wiping out 2 decades worth of progress. This is all they talked about. Homicides are up. Homicides are up specifically in 2020. They're surging. There's a spike. Who speak for yourself, buddy. We've seen everyone in the political media state it's clear fact. Well, let me, I don't totally trust police statistics. So, I don't want to, align with that framing too much, it being a clear fact, but we've definitely seen people in the political media say that homicides are up. Now, the second part of his tweet, I don't know how relevant this is. After we've talked about how he's wrong on that major he's been living under a rock for years, and somehow also being the executive director of a progressive magazine, and like working for Bernie Sanders at some point. Well, I don't know whether that was in the 2020 campaign or the previous one, but like, how has he been doing that and also living under a rock? I don't get it. Or he's been lying. I mean, we established that. Either of those things have to be true. Okay. I mean, the living under a rock, not literally, but like, yeah, you know what I mean. It has to be true. And so this stuff, I don't even know what it's about. It's like he's trying to like debunk something about schools being closed having something to do with the surges, and like he thinks he's maybe being progressive and like debunking this, but like you're saying this like talking point. I mean, this was a talking point of everybody, left, right, and center. I mean, pointing it out at least. Homicide rates surged across the country. Um, and then what they did with that varied. Um, but certainly the right used it a lot to attack the to attack Democrats and policies that they wanted to associate with Democrats, whether or not Democrats had much to do with those, like the defund the police movement, or the movement for Black Lives, calling for the defunding of the police, and the Republicans tried to say you defunded your police departments, uh, uh, you had progressive district attorneys, and now you're to blame for the rise in homicides. Um, and so not only was it just a fact that uh, a data point that news articles and news commentators and journalists constantly reported on in 2020 and 2021. It was also a propaganda tool for Republicans, mixing it with falsehoods so that they could try to win elections based on that, and also for anti-reform Democrats. It wasn't just particularly Republicans who were doing this. So, like, I mean, that just would have, even if you never ever went to a news publication website, and you just literally read Twitter all the time. Like, I don't know how possibly could have you possibly could miss that so many people in political media stated that data point. You 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 this person is either lying or very ignorant willfully. And why would they be if they're an executive director of a progressive magazine? It just is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And this is there's a quote tweet there, and there's a little video, and this has to do with the Chicago mayoral race, but I don't think that's even worth getting into right now.